We moved into my grandparents' house in 2016 when they decided to downsize. I was 9. They had built the place in the early 90s, and it sits on 5 acres out on the outskirts of a small southern town. Woods and open fields stretch around it, and a slow, muddy river winds past our southern fence line. On the sides, our property touches our only neighbor's land, an odd, crooked patch of acreage with a house that felt like it was sinking into the ground. That house was old. The original farmhouse had been built in the 1920s, and over the years, it had been added onto in all the wrong ways. Like someone stapled extra rooms together without a plan. The siding was discolored and soft-looking. Every time you glanced at it, it just looked wet, even on dry days. The yard was a nightmare. Overgrown bushes tangled with vines, broken fountains surrounded by weeds, gnomes missing heads, and old trash that looked like it had been there for years. Grocery bags flapped in the tree branches. A rusted lawnmower sat in the middle of the grass like it had died mid-job and was never moved. It was the place that made you want to hold your breath when you walked by. At the time, the house was home to 2 elderly sisters, Violet and Agnes, and 3 kids. Violet was the quieter of the 2, always sitting on the porch in a faded green rocking chair, just watching the trees. Agnes was sharper and more active, but she still moved like her bones hurt. Both women were in their 70s, at least. The kids were their grandchildren. The boy, Liam, was my age and in my grade at school. The other 2 were girls named Allison and Kelsey. They were the same age as my younger sister. Liam was weird. I didn't like him, and I didn't want to hang out with him. But we were in the same class, so we got lumped together a lot. He took that as permission to just show up at my house whenever he wanted, no knocking or texting. I'd be playing a game in my room and turn around, and he'd just be there. One time, I looked out my window and saw him doing cannonballs in our pool. Another time, he walked straight into the kitchen, opened our fridge, and started eating a slice of leftover pizza with his hands like it was no big deal. When we hung out, he wasn't fun. He was obsessed with anime, like really obsessed. But I didn't watch any, so I had no idea what he was talking about. He'd say weird lines in Japanese and get mad when I didn't laugh. Sometimes, he'd get this look in his eyes, like he was imagining something violent. One time, he chased me with a pair of sharp garden shears, swinging them around and laughing like it was a game. Another time, we were on an old wooden bridge that crosses the creek near the back of our properties, and I swear, he tried to push me in. He claimed it was a joke, but the way he smiled after, I knew he meant it. The twins were different, quiet, and almost invisible. Their clothes were always dirty, and they had speech impediments that made it hard to understand them. It was obvious nobody at home was helping them. Their voices were garbled, like they were still toddlers, even though they were 7. They flinched easily, and they always looked hungry. Their dad was in and out of jail, so he wasn't around, and that brings us to the mom, Teresa. The first time I saw her, she was trying to hook a hose up to the spigot at the edge of their property, right near our side yard. She was tall, way taller than anyone else in her family, and heavy-set, with long, thick, curly black hair and glasses that looked like they belonged in the 80s. She was different, put together in a way that the rest of the family wasn't. Her clothes were clean. Her hair was always styled, too. She smiled at me like she'd been waiting for me to come over. She asked me if I could help her with the faucet and said it was stuck. I walked over and turned it, and it moved easily. She gasped and clapped her hands, told me I was so strong, and how lucky she was I came over. I felt proud. She made me feel like I was something special. Then she said, "Did you know you have a third eye?" I blinked. "What?" She smiled wider and said, "We all have one, not a physical eye, but a spiritual one." She said, "It lets you see the truth, whatever that meant." Before I could ask anything, she started walking back toward her house and told me to come with her. So I did. The inside of their house hit me like a wave of rot. It smelled like spoiled food, mildew, and something worse I couldn't place. Trash was everywhere. Garbage bags torn open, rotting food on plates, stained furniture. Even dirty diapers were stuffed behind the couch. I tried to leave, but Teresa grabbed my wrist and led me upstairs. Her room was nothing like the rest of the house. It was pristine, with pink wallpaper, clean carpet, shelves full of porcelain dolls, and very ornate old furniture. The air smelled like rose water and old perfume. It was like I stepped into a different building. She gestured for me to sit on a little cushion stool in the corner and then walked over to her vanity and opened a drawer. She pulled out a silver tray with a black candle, a crystal, and a thick leather-bound book. The second I saw the pentagram on the cover, my stomach turned. My parents are Catholic. I knew what that symbol meant, and suddenly I started seeing it everywhere. On the jewelry box, on the mirror's frame, and peeking out from under the corner of the rug on the floor, etched into the wood. I jumped up. Sorry, my mom wants me home. Bye. I didn't wait for a response. I ran. In 2019, Agnes had a heart attack and died inside the house. I heard she collapsed in the living room in front of all the kids. I went to the funeral. It was in this rundown Baptist church on the edge of town. The family was stone-faced, like they didn't know how to react, except for one woman who I'd never seen before. She sat in the second pew, sobbing so loud it echoed. Nobody acknowledged her. That same year, Liam disappeared. The story was that he tried to kill one of the twins and was sent to a psychiatric facility. I never got the full details, but my parents sat my sister and me down that night and said, in no uncertain terms, we were never to go near the family again. I remember their faces, grim and serious. That's when it all clicked. All the little things I hadn't understood, the weird stuff, the fear. Eventually, the rest of the family moved away. They left Violet behind, just an old, frail woman living alone in that collapsing house. She passed away in 2020, alone in that house. Her estate went up for auction a few months later. One of my old elementary school teachers, Mrs. S., bought it with her husband. They tore down most of the structure but kept the original 1920 section, the same part where Teresa's room had been. MRSS invited us over to see the renovations. It was beautiful, open floor plan, all new appliances, and fresh paint. She showed us upstairs, and that's when my skin started crawling. We were in her room, and I could feel it, even though the floors were carpeted now. I knew the pentagram was still there, like the floor remembered. I felt nauseous, like something was watching me from the walls. I was starting to feel a little chemistry between us, and I figured this would be one of those dates where you actually end up seeing the person again. Then, right before the movie started, like right after the last trailer, and just as the lights dimmed lower, I noticed movement from the corner of my eye. Someone walked into the theater. They didn't say anything or stop to look around or check their phone for seat numbers like most people do. They walked in, slow, straight up the steps, and sat directly behind us. I mean, directly. There were maybe 100 open seats, but he chose the one right behind me. Emily turned to look at him, too, and she gave me a weird glance. Like, really? I kind of chuckled and sat under my breath. Figures. But right away, something fell off. You know that feeling when someone's eyes are burning into the back of your head? That's what it felt like. I glanced back after a minute or two. He wasn't watching the screen. He was staring at us. I only saw him for a split second, but he didn't flinch or look away. He didn't even pretend to be interested in the movie. He was just sitting forward a bit, like someone might do if they were really into a scene. But his face wasn't even turned toward the screen. It was angled right at us, at me. I whispered to Emily, "He's just staring." She nodded slowly and whispered back, "I know." We tried to ignore it for a while. The movie started, and I really did try to get into it, but every few minutes, I'd feel it again. The presence behind us. Not just someone being annoying. This was different. There was an intensity to it, like he was waiting for something. After about 20 minutes, I leaned forward in my seat and turned my head a little so I could glance back more casually. Same thing. He was still staring. He was middle-aged, maybe late 40s, clean-shaven, kind of pale, wearing a dark gray hoodie. Something about him just looked empty, like he wasn't even there mentally. His eyes didn't look glazed over, like someone who was zoning out. From what I saw, he never blinked. I turned back around and whispered to Emily, "This guy is really creeping me out." She looked genuinely scared now. "Do you want to move?" We considered it, but where would we go? It would still be in the same room, and we were already in the best seats. Moving might make it awkward or even provoke him. A few minutes later, I felt something. The guy breathed on me, not loud or exaggerated. It was soft but unmistakable, a deep, slow exhale right behind my seat. I spun around, and he was leaning forward over the back of my seat, his face closer than it should have been. I stared at him and said, "Dude, can you not?" He didn't respond. He just slowly leaned back in his seat. That was it. I told Emily, "Let's move." We got up and walked down to the front corner row. It sucked, and the angle was bad, but we needed distance. I could barely focus on the movie anymore, just kept glancing back every couple of minutes. And every time I looked back, there he was, staring straight at us. He didn't budge. Around halfway through the movie, we heard footsteps. He was coming down the steps. Emily grabbed my arm, and we both held still. The footsteps stopped a few rows above us. We didn't turn around. I don't know how long he stood there. I didn't dare look. Then, finally, he walked back up to the top row. I whispered, "We need to leave." She nodded. We grabbed our stuff and slipped out quietly. As we exited the theater and went down the hallway toward the lobby, I glanced back through the glass window in the theater door. He was standing in the aisle now. He wasn't watching the screen. He was just standing there, still staring at us. We went straight to the front and told the concession guy that someone was acting really weird in Theater 6. His smile faded instantly, and he said, "Again." "What do you mean, again?" I said, and he hesitated, then said, "He's been coming in randomly for like a month. Always late shows, and never buys anything. You guys aren't the first ones to complain about him." I responded, "Why hasn't anyone kicked him out?" He looked uncomfortable. He said, "He doesn't technically do anything illegal. Management says unless he touches someone or breaks a rule, we can't really do much." Emily was almost in tears. She asked if someone could walk us to our car. He agreed, and one of the janitors walked us out. The guy didn't follow us that night, at least not that we saw, but the whole ride back I couldn't shake this fear that he might have written down my license plate, that he might have followed us at a distance, watched us leave, and found out where Emily lived. When I dropped her off, for weeks afterward, I was paranoid. My cop friend also told me it was a load of horseshit, that they couldn't do anything about him. The theater, as a business, would reserve every right to kick somebody out. I avoided that side of town for a while. Emily and I talked a few times after that, but never ended up seeing each other again, unfortunately. I think we were both shaken from what happened. I have not been back to the theater since, though I don't see any reviews on the website about the guy. I wonder just how many people have actually had the same experience. I told Mrs. S I had a headache and had to go. She was disappointed. I was supposed to stay for dinner. I avoided the house after that until last year. Mrs. S asked me to dog sit while they went out of town for a week. I said yes. I figured it was just a job, easy money. Every night, I'd ring the doorbell, and they'd buzz me in through the smart lock. Their dogs, the Shih Tzu named Muffin and a snorting little pug named Henry, would greet me, tails wagging. The first four nights were quiet, peaceful even. I feed the dogs, play with them a bit, turn on the porch light, and lock up. But on the last night, I was about to leave when Henry started barking at the staircase. He planted his little legs and just barked over and over. Muffin backed away, whimpering. There was nothing there. And then, thump. It came from upstairs. Another thump, louder this time. I didn't stay to investigate. I ran to the front door, slammed it behind me, and locked it. The whole walk home, I couldn't shake the feeling something had followed me. Now it's 2025. We hadn't heard a word about the family in over 4 years. That is, until recently. A girl from school told me she saw Teresa at a farmer's market in a nearby town. Apparently, she started some kind of religious group, calls herself a truth seer. They live in a mobile home community far out in the woods. Flyers have started popping up on bulletin boards and telephone poles. I don't trust it. I don't trust her. I think Teresa is truly evil. I mean, she neglected her kids. She left her mother in that house to rot. And I think she brought something into it, something dark, something that stayed behind. I still have nightmares of her and Liam. They stand at the foot of my bed, staring at me, not speaking at all. And every time I pass by that house, even now, I get chills. The good parts, such as the paint, the furniture, it's all surface level. That place remembers, and I don't think it ever let go of what happened. Music there. My name is Keegan. I reside in Michigan with my parents. High school was a decent timeline for me, as I had gotten to meet various new people during my time there. Obviously, I also had some people I tended to hang out with outside of school. The only time I really hung out with them was at places like my local community center, where we would work out and play basketball. Back in freshman year, it was getting close to the end of the year, and I was excited for summer break to be coming. I would be starting driver's training and even start doing a side job to at least begin making money. So, I didn't have the fastest start. I had this one friend named Clayton. I would usually hang out with him at least once a week. He was a grade lower than me, his final year of junior high. We were, to some extent, good friends, and my dad and I even took him to a Detroit Pistons basketball game at one point. He was quite a big basketball fan, so he was more than eager to attend his first game. Despite all the fun activities in the past, it was until I started becoming more busy that he was somewhat beginning to change. He would usually get a bit sad or angry because I'm not free on a specific day. He was the kind of person to have some pretty intense anger issues when he got pissed off enough. I remember this one day when I told him I wasn't free again and that I would be home cleaning. It seemed as if he would find the right days where I'm not available to hang out. I didn't check my phone until after I finished cleaning, and I found out that he removed me on Snapchat. I messaged him on Messenger, asking why he got so mad and why he decided to remove me as a friend. He assumed I was lying to avoid hanging out with him. That thought crossed my mind for a while, and I even followed up with it at times because he was starting to become more obnoxious on occasion. I would lie and say I'm doing something, going somewhere, or already made plans with another friend. He felt so left out that one day, when the sun had set, he showed up to my apartment I was living in at the time, unannounced. I asked him why he didn't text me ahead of time. Nothing. He just stared at me for a few seconds before walking away slowly. Why was he here at this hour? Why didn't he say anything? Why did he just give me this 1,000-yard stare, as if I did something to offend him? I hadn't spoken to him the next day. That is also when I turned off my Snap Map on Snapchat to hide my location from him. After he apparently added me back, some time had gone by, about a month, and he's still the same person. Angry or sad when I can't pay him a visit. That's when I got a text from my friend Nick, who I barely saw in person. He knows Clayton and his ex-girlfriend. Nick had told me some gruesome things about him and what he's done, but my heart dropped as I heard from him and Clayton's ex that he held a knife at his ex-girlfriend's throat and sexually assaulted her. I knew that he was a psycho right then and there. I removed him as a friend on all platforms without any hesitation. He texted me on Instagram before I removed him on there, too. He blew up my phone with messages asking why I'm removing him. I just told him I needed some time to myself and I would add him back when I am better. But I used that as an excuse to get away from him. That night, while I was home alone, since my parents went to the next town over for dinner with some old friends of theirs, I heard a knock at my apartment door. I looked out of the peephole, and no one was there. I opened the door a crack to survey the hallway, but no one. I figured it was someone ding-dong ditching. I figured they wouldn't come back. But when I randomly looked out my bedroom window, the light was burned out by the sidewalk. I noticed a small flash in the corner of my eye, and I thought it was from inside someone's car. But I felt my stomach drop when I saw a tall figure standing in front of my window. It was him. I opened my window and told him to go away and that I don't want him here. He told me to let him in so he could tell me something. I firmly said no and told him I want him gone. But when he began to move around a bit, I noticed something was in his hand. I couldn't exactly make out what he was holding until he held it up. And when I tell you I was frightened, I felt as if I was going to pass out because, I kid you not, Clayton was holding a knife in his hand. I told him I was calling the police, but he had already taken off by the time the police had gotten there. I gave the best description of him that I could describe to the cops. I haven't heard a word about or from him since that horrific night. I honestly wouldn't be so surprised if he was trying to kill me while I was home alone. I believe he had murderous intentions. I assumed he probably ended up in juvie after what happened. Not only was I horrified from that experience, but it may have been one of the most traumatic moments of my life. Having your parents gone, along with it, makes it feel undeniably more unsettling. I am glad I disconnected all contact from him when I did, because I think if I continued to remain friends with him I probably could have ended up as one of his endless punching bags or even worse, music dead. This happened in late 2022, when I went on what I thought would be a fun and simple first date with someone I matched with on a dating app. Her name was Emily, and we had been texting for about 2 weeks before deciding to meet up. We both shared a love for horror movies, and when Smile came out, we agreed that seeing it together would be the perfect first date. We picked a weekday night, Thursday. It was a late showing, 10:15 p.m., and at a small, older theater just outside of town. I offered to drive and picked her up around 9:30. She seemed normal, friendly, maybe a little shy. She was quiet for most of the drive, but opened up once we started talking about horror movies we liked growing up. When we got there, the parking lot was almost empty. I joked about how this theater looked like something out of a horror movie itself. Dim lights, flickering neon, and not a single person in the lobby. When we walked in, there was only one guy working at the concession counter. And when I asked if it was going to be a full theater, he laughed and said we were the only ones who had bought tickets for that showing. At first, I thought that was great. No crowds. Just me, her, and the movie. We went into Theater 6 and chose seats right in the center, about 4 rows from the back. It was freezing in there, which Emily pointed out right away. I offered her my hoodie, and we laughed about how creepy it felt being the only ones in the entire room. We sat back and talked while waiting for the previews to start.